Adam, you have kind of built your reputation in the private equity world, and yet in the book you reference that many people, maybe even 90%, don't even get what private equity is all about. Did I misread that? Is that obvious? Is that accurate that there is a enormous percentage of business owners that have never even thought of the term private equity? Is that
Well,
accurate?
I'll tell you that they've heard the term, but they don't know what it means. And so let me expound on that. So, every time I teach a seminar, every time I got a room full of people and I'm the topic is private equity, I start my lecture or start my seminar by giving a simple 10-question quiz. And I have 5 answers instead of 4. So I eliminate the guesswork of statistic, of someone being able to pass by guessing. So I've got 5 choices. The proper answers are inside the private equity playbook, that first book that you read. These are all basic questions. These are not trick questions. They're basic questions. In a private, what's the typical lifespan of a private equity fund? And who's the limited partner and who's the general partner? And how to, it's basic questions like that. And every time I give that quiz, I'm talking a room filled with, MBAs, business owners, executives, 90% of the room fails the test. 90%. I've only had one person in the 10 years I've been doing this who scored perfect. And she read my book the night before, and she had an eidetic memory, and she got a 10. I don't know what else to tell you. She was a freak of nature, how smart this girl was. And so she got 10 out of 10, but most people who pass get 6 out of 10. And most people who fail get 1, 2, 3 right out of 10. And so what I'm demonstrating to them before I then get into educating them about private equity is I show them how much they don't know. And I point out things like, look, private equity is the world's largest source of non-bank, capital. Debt
Right.
lending and equity, infusion, and private equity buys 50% of all companies on the planet. And on average, it doubles the stock market in terms of returns. And all we ever hear on the news is bad things about anything, let alone private equity. So, I hear all the private equity bashing, and I hear entrepreneurs, who answered the phone when it rang, sold their business to that company, didn't put the forethought planning in. Some had a good experience, some had a bad experience, but essentially it's an understood asset class. And it's because of private equity, we have an inflated private market to sell a business. Whether we sell a private equity or not, the fact that we're going to get a lot of money is because there is this market that they created. There's the financing that they created. And we really need to, if we want to be an astute entrepreneur and get the most out of that potential, we have to understand how it works, and we have to understand what its needs are and kind of what its built-in inherent flaws are, so I can manipulate and take advantages of them, and get what I want, which is capital and wealth creation. And I got to give them what they need, which is returns for their limited partners. And so, it's by better understanding how capital works, we can then be more successful as entrepreneurs. And so I just find that it's a highly misunderstood, you say private equity and people have visceral reactions and nobody knows how it works. And so that book was designed to educate a generation.
Gotcha.
Are there any
And
assumptions people have that they're just way off?
Well, so let me start with one. So most entrepreneurs have this attitude. Again, I'll call it the arrogance of success. If I sell my company and stay as a minority shareholder, there's no possible way, that these people are going to know what I know about running a company. Never going to happen. And I point them to Jeff Bezos, and I say, before the divorce and a recent drop in Amazon stock, Jeff Bezos was the world's wealthiest man. And he only owned 12% of Amazon. And so, today I think he owns 10%. It's worth 170 billion. I think he's the 3rd richest person on the planet last time I checked. But here's a guy who owns 12%, of his company, which means 88% of other people own that business. He's the world's wealthiest man. If it works for Jeff Bezos, it can work for you, Mr. Arrogant young, entrepreneur who's got a company worth 30 million. And so the first misconception is, if I don't have control it's not good and I can't possibly make money or thrive or flourish. And, I would show you that with institutional capital, and I talk about it in the book. I don't want to see any entrepreneur have a business worth more than $100 million who doesn't ring the bell, who doesn't create asset diversification and diversify their wealth base and become a minority shareholder, bring in institutional capital, accelerate the pace of growth because you now have an unlimited checkbook and you can actually generate wealth faster with a partner than you can without the partner. The other problem entrepreneurs have then is when they get to be about 50, they start to slow down a bit and they start to get worried. My horizon, I can see the end point at the end of the, light at the end of the tunnel. Now I don't want to invest in my business the way I should. Now I don't want to expand and focus on growth and do all those things I did as a young person when I was building the company aggressively, to create the business. I now want to shy away from all of that. And I start making bad business decisions because I'm not making good decisions focused on growth. But when I diversify my assets, I don't have to worry about that. I've got enough gold hidden in the tree that I'm good. I still have enough rolled forward to where I get a second bite of the apple that's bigger than the first. And I'm now using other people's money, OPM, to grow my empire. And I can be aggressive again and I can swing for the fence instead of, trying to hit a single. And I can make good business decisions. And so I think those are two areas, from a private equity perspective. I would also say that another problem that I see, and I wrote an article about this recently in Forbes, here's a shocking statistic. 73% of entrepreneurs who sell their company to private equity do not survive the first 5-year hold period. Why is that? 73%. And I saw your eyes go up. It's like, that's the number. 73%. Well, first of all, there was a group of people who were at 70 and they sold their business and they plan to retire anyway.
Yeah.
But then of that group that's left, invariably, when we give them a wheelbarrow full of gold, we've got some people who think game over. I've arrived. I don't have to work hard anymore. I just got a wheelbarrow full of gold. Well, your private equity sponsor just gave you a wheelbarrow full of gold. They haven't gotten any gold from you yet, and they need you to actually double down and work harder than you've ever worked before to generate the returns they need to justify that investment by their shareholders in their fund, and they want you to work harder than you've ever worked before. This isn't time for relaxation. This is time to get back to work, brother. It's like, sister, time to make wealth happen for me, as your majority shareholder. And so I think a lot of people check out, after they get a wheelbarrow full of gold. And so I think people think too often that selling their business is a one and done event. I tell people it's a rest stop on the wealth creation highway. And when you're bringing in private equity, the level of game is going to increase dramatically, and the expectations are going to increase dramatically. And you got to gear up for spring training. You may have just won the Super Bowl, but it's spring training now, and it's time to get back to work. Or you won the World Series, Texas Rangers, but now it's like back to work. It's April, Matt Scherzer, my neighbor, get your ass back over there and start throwing the ball across the plate. I paid a lot of money and you disappointed me, during the World Series, you were hurt, it's like we got to get back to work. And so why do professional athletes train? Why do they go to spring trainings? Why do they have camps? Why do they practice? Because, it's a high level. If you want to be a professional and win a championship, you got to be at the highest level. Well, if you're working with private equity, you're playing at the highest level of business and you need to be on your A game. So
that's
these
awesome.
are some of the misconceptions I think people see.